Catus, Maximus here, this time with a review of the Power Torque O'Reilly's Auto Parts Power Torque quarter-inch drive sealed head ratchet this time. People had asked about my opinion, so I squandered $15 on this little ratchet. I didn't need any more quarter-inch ratchets, that's for sure. 72 tooth, and I was noticing that it seems to be some type of similar design standard to the Craftsman's and the 72 tooth Duralast and even the Capris. Although I will mention it is not the same forging as a Capri, although I believe inside I'll find a similar ratchet mechanism, which is what I call a modified Williams. What I am noticing about the Power Torque is it's pretty well made. It is just a little bit longer than what would be considered a traditional length quarter-inch drive sealed head ratchet. In this case with the Capri does not have the tightest anvil, but it does have a pretty low amount of backdrag, pretty easy to reverse direction, and the screws go through the body and into the metal plate. So when you rebuild it, you don't have to worry about stripping out the ratchet body itself. This is a little bit different because the screws do go into the ratchet body. It's not a big deal. One thing I was noticing, at least on this particular Power Torque, is it has a pretty heavy amount of backdrag. It's actually significant. To the point to where if the bolt's loose, the ratchet is not going to ratchet. I mean, surprisingly enough, it's one of the stiffer quarter-inch ratchets I found, and even the reverse lever is actually quite stiff. So it's pretty heavy duty, and then for some reason in the forward direction, it's surprising. I mean, I can show you here. I should probably tilt it this way. You can see I can get the ratchet almost 90 degrees before it starts actually ratcheting. If I do the same thing with the Capri, even though it has a shorter handle, which means it has less weight on it, it still has far less backdrag. So that's the biggest thing I'll have to point out with this thing, is an insane amount of backdrag. But at least the anvil is actually nice and tight. A lot of people like that, and I do appreciate that as well. Once you get a socket on it, the backdrag isn't so bad. It's still pretty significant. Fit and finish on this ratchet's pretty nice. Everything looks just fine. We can see that the grind around the periphery here is not perfect, a little bit thinner on this side, but it's really not too bad, especially for a $15 ratchet. Other thing is you can look across the top and see how even this is, and that's not really too bad at all. They did do a stamping or a recess there for the switch, but then they put in an extra bulky switch, so it kind of defeats the purpose. Usually you do this this recess here and then put in a thin switch just to help protect it a little bit more. We can see that it is floating above the surface. Although when it gets some pressure on it, it does tend to hit the body. You do have to be kind of careful because some manufacturers do make the switch float kind of high above the ratchet body. That's a problem if it gets dropped and happens to smack right on that switch, it can damage it. Overall, for 15 bucks, I think it's a good ratchet. They just need just a little bit softer of a spring in there. There is only one spring, the spring that runs the ratchet pawl. Actually, it does seem a little bit dry. We do have T7 screws in here. Let's go and, wow. Those are seem like they're Loctited. Maybe not. They were just torqued in there and dry. I do not see any Loctite on that little screw. They were just torqued, they feel like they're torqued right near the maximum amount that a T7 can take. Gee. If you had a slightly worn T7 or not a very high quality one that was not sized real well, these are some of my old American made rigids here, you very well may strip out those screws. Those things were pretty darn tight. Pull out the front cover, and this is what I call a modified Williams design, where they have this, some people call it a bat wing pawl, and the one spring is just a spring and a ball that hits the bottom of that. And then the switch just is a separate piece that just kind of plugs into the back of the anvil, or the ratchet pawl. Little disappointed there. It is actually totally bone dry. Although, what am I seeing there? Is that a O-ring? Let me get a little closer look. Well, at least that's a nice little touch. This little thing right here, that actually is indeed an O-ring and we can see it flexing around there. So that's actually nice to see. It has a nice tight pawl or anvil, and it is O-ringed, so not too bad. This is always fun to get apart. Let me get a little, or I should say it's fun to get back together. You don't want to lose the spring. I found with these, you kind of have to use a very thin screwdriver, hold the ball in order to drop the anvil back in there. It is very stiff in there. And we'll pull that out. There's our ball. There's our spring. And when I talk about the switch plugging in, this seems to be what we call modified Williams. Craftsman does this too, where it has this little plus. As a matter of fact, this plus is so universal that I think I could probably take the switch out of this Capri and actually put it in this power torque. It's just such a universal design. So that just plugs into there, and so when you're reversing it, it's just rocking this back and forth and popping that angle. So at least these are pretty easy to modify. All you would really need to do is take this spring here, and you don't even have to grind it. You could just crush it with a pair of pliers. Actually, I'm going to crush it with my fingers. That may not be quite enough, but you could either replace this spring, or maybe crushing it might work. Just crush it a little bit and see if it reduces the tension. We can see that there is no seal around the little switch. Let me get this back together. Oh, and in case anybody's curious how they get a hole down there, it's pretty simple. That hole is actually not straight. They drill it right in about that angle and just comes right down through there. So anyway, that's the general impression I have of this power torque. Backdrag is a little stiff. Fortunately, it's just one spring that you have to deal with, and you can actually reduce the backdrag. Besides that, it's a nice, it seems like just a fine little ratchet. Nothing particularly spectacular about it. It uses a bog standard mechanism, but at least they gave it an O-ring and machined it tight enough so that the anvil doesn't wobble around. And that'd be my general take on the GM Power Torque sealed head ratchets. And probably won't be picking up any of the larger ones because I just don't need them. That's why usually when I'm trying out a new brand, I'll just buy the 1/4 inch because, of course, it's the cheapest. That, and I have a rag because, of course, all the oil, even though there's a seal here and the plate's pretty tight, all the oil just, leaks out of the switch instead. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.